The air was crisp, the sun shining brightly as Jonas made his way through the winding paths of his village. The people around him bustled about, each preparing for the upcoming festival. Decorations of all colors were strung up on every available surface. The scent of fresh flowers wafted through the air. As Jonas made his way to the town center, he was greeted by his neighbors, each sporting smiles and bright festive clothing. There was Daria, the village baker, carrying trays of freshly baked goods. Next to her was Leo, the town farmer, carrying a basket full of fruits and vegetables. And finally there was Max, the village musician, tuning his guitar in preparation for the festivities. Jonas greeted them all with a nod and a smile, but his mind was elsewhere. He had grown restless in his simple life, yearning for something more. He longed for adventure, to explore the world beyond his village, but he was too afraid to take the risk. As he wandered through the festival, he couldn't help but feel a sense of longing. He watched as the people around him danced and laughed, their faces filled with joy and excitement, but he felt disconnected, unable to truly immerse himself in the festivities. As the sun began to set, Jonas decided it was time to leave. He said his goodbyes to his neighbors, who wished him a good night and a happy spring. As he made his way back to his small hut on the edge of the village, he couldn't shake the feeling there had to be more to life than what he was currently living. As he lay in bed that night, staring up at the thatched roof above him, he couldn't help but wonder what lay beyond the borders of his village. He knew he had a good life, but he couldn't shake the feeling there was something more waiting for him out there. Jonas stepped out of his small cabin and took a deep breath of fresh morning air. The sun was just beginning to rise above the trees, casting a warm, orange glow over everything. He slung a basket over his shoulder and made his way towards the edge of the woods to gather some berries for breakfast. As he walked, he couldn't help but think about the world around him. It was vastly different from what his grandparents had described to him. Climate change had altered the landscape, but the people had adapted and were thriving once again. The new temperate climate was a far cry from the frigid winters and scorching summers of the past. Suddenly he heard music drifting through the trees. Intrigued, he followed the sound until he came upon a clearing where Tia was playing her guitar. She noticed Jonas and smiled. "Hey there, Jonas. Out for some berries?" Jonas nodded, and they chatted for a bit before he continued on his way. As he reached a particularly dense patch of bushes, he stumbled upon something buried under the pile of leaves. He brushed away the debris and gasped when he saw an old TV set. He had heard about these from his grandparents, but he had never seen one in person. With a sense of excitement and curiosity, he carefully picked up the TV and made his way back to his cabin. His adventure could wait. This was something new and exciting he had to figure out first before he could leave. As he worked on getting it to function, he couldn't help but wonder what other relics from the past were hidden in the woods. Jonas had been tinkering with the TV for days, and he finally managed to get it up and running. As he watched the crystal clear picture and browsed through the extensive list of shows and movies stored in its memory, he felt like he had been transported to another world. For the first time in his life, he was able to experience the world beyond his small community. However, as the days went by, Jonas found himself spending more and more time in front of the TV, neglecting his usual tasks and chores. He even ignored a knock on his door one day, too engrossed in a show to bother getting up. He couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt creeping up on him. He knew he was doing less work than usual, and he was aware that he was becoming less interactive with the people in his community, but the lure of the TV was too strong for him to resist. As the days turned into weeks, Jonas began to feel a sense of emptiness inside. Despite the endless entertainment options the TV offered, he realized he missed the simplicity of his old life. He missed the warmth of the sun on his face as he tended to his crops and the laughter of his neighbors as they gathered for meals and festivals. Deep down, he knew he had to find a way to balance his newfound love for TV with the responsibilities he had to his community. But for now, he couldn't help but feel lost in the strange new world he had discovered. One bright morning, Jonas woke up to the sound of birds chirping and the warmth of the sun on his face. He stepped outside his cabin to check on his berry bushes and found a pile of ripe, untouched berries on his doorstep. It was strange, as he had always made sure to harvest them daily. At least he used to. As he walked around his garden, he noticed the soil had been tended to and the plants were thriving. His friends had come by and taken care of his garden while he had been preoccupied with the TV. A wave of guilt washed over him as he realized how he had been neglecting his responsibilities and relationships. He looked over at his cabin, noticing the dust on the windowsill and the clutter inside. He had been so engrossed in the TV that he had stopped keeping his living space tidy. With a heavy heart, Jonas made his way back inside the cabin and sat down in front of the TV. He flipped through the channels, but nothing caught his attention like it had before. He realized that the shows, while entertaining, were not fulfilling in the same way as his interactions with the people and nature around him. He thought about the festivals, the music, the laughter, and the sense of community that he had been missing out on. He realized that those were the things that made life worth living. With a newfound determination, he turned off the TV and stepped outside. Jonas set out on foot towards Marcus's blacksmith shop, feeling the weight of his neglectful behavior heavy on his shoulders. As he walked by, he passed by familiar sights: the community garden, the river, the forest. But he saw them differently now, as if they were calling out to him to come and explore. When he arrived at Marcus's shop, he saw the old man hard at work with the sword. "Good morning, Marcus," Jonas said as he entered. "I was wondering if I could borrow a sledgehammer." Marcus paused his work and looked at Jonas curiously. "A sledgehammer? Whatever for?" "I found a TV, and it's been taking up too much of my time," Jonas explained. "I want to destroy it and get rid of it for good." Marcus chuckled. "Ah yes, the TV. I remember when those were popular. People used to spend hours upon hours staring at them, hardly ever coming up for air." Jonas nodded, feeling validated. "Exactly. It's ruining my life, but I don't know how to get rid of it." "Well, my boy," Marcus said with a twinkle in his eye, "perhaps you don't have to get rid of it entirely. Maybe there's another way to make it work for you instead of against you." Jonas raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Marcus leaned back on his stool and began to recount stories of his youth when screens were everywhere and people were glued to them. There were gardening shows, cooking shows, all sorts of things you could learn from. Maybe you could use the TV to expand your knowledge of the world, find new ways to tend to your garden, or cook a meal. Jonas considered this for a moment. He had never thought of using the TV as a tool for learning before. "I see what you mean. Maybe there's a way to use it in a positive way." "Exactly," Marcus said with a nod. "You don't have to give up on the TV entirely, but you have to be mindful of how you use it. Don't let it control you. Control it." Jonas thanked Marcus for his advice and left the shop feeling a sense of renewed purpose. Maybe there was a way to find balance between watching the TV and his responsibilities and relationships after all. He was determined to make it work. Jonas returned home from his conversation with Marcus feeling more grounded and connected to his community. As he entered his cabin, he couldn't resist turning on the TV, but this time with a different purpose in mind. He scrolled through the channels until he found a show about making homemade gifts for friends and family. The host was showing viewers how to make simple and thoughtful gifts out of materials found around the house. Feeling inspired, Jonas rummaged through his drawers and shelves for supplies. He found some scrap fabric, twine, and old buttons that he could use to make small bags and pouches. He also found some dried herbs that he could package into tea blends for his friends. With each item he found, Jonas felt a sense of excitement and satisfaction at the thought of creating something with his own hands. As the sun set outside his window, Jonas worked on his gifts while the TV played in the background. He felt a sense of contentment that he hadn't felt in a while, knowing that he was creating something meaningful for his loved ones. As he finished his last gift, he turned off the TV, feeling grateful for the reminder to balance his desire for entertainment with the fulfillment that came from creating and connecting with others.